All right. Welcome, everybody, to the World Crypto Network spectacular hangout from the Computer Chaos Conference, or, well, actually, that's not even what it's called. What's it called, Peter? Peter Todd can't show his video, so they have strict rules there about showing video because of the Tor developers don't want to be seen. I'm joined by Chris Ellis, who was having some power problems, so if he might pop in and out. Hi, Chris.
Hello. Yeah, sorry about that. The whole power went out. I could do nothing. As
And
It's a
we have
conspiracy.
yes, Mr. Theo Goodman, and we have Leslie Frost.
Hello.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi.
And Peter Todd, who has
Hi there.
kind of a butterfly.
Hello, Peter. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Great. How are you
And
doing?
who?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm going to just
Everyone,
turn this
see
over
through
to Chris. He's a better interviewer.
So, dude, Peter, it's been great for you to join us. I've been following your tweets over the last few days. Why don't you tell us what's so exciting about this conference in Hamburg?
I mean, unlike most Bitcoin conferences, I'm actually going most of the talks. There's, I mean, this is a general computer hacking-ish culture and tech conference. It's extremely large. I think it's, I don't know, 1,500 people attending or something, 2,000. And yeah, I've been talking to people I know from Tor. Jacob Applebaum had yet another set of leaks recently released yesterday.
And for those who don't know, who is Jacob Applebaum?
So he's a well-known board, although his role is really more of a journalist these days. He's been doing work on the Snowden leaks and figuring out how to best report them, really analyzing them and so on.
Well, that's great. And one of the tweets that you mentioned, which really caught my eye, was you talked about some of the things that you guys felt were working in cryptography. And one of the things you mentioned that wasn't broken, that was the term you used, wasn't broken, was Tor. But of course, a lot of the conversations that we've been having recently in the crypto space is that actually Tor is a bit of a honeypot, and that actually it's largely compromised because the claim is that the CIA own an awful lot of the exit nodes and are therefore able to work out from that the traffic that's going on. Is that right?
Yeah, so a lot of that's bullshit.
Why is it bullshit?
I mean, it's an extremely centralized system. So, when you go use Tor, to some extent, you're trusting the devs themselves. I mean, now, of course, you could go say that the devs themselves are, CIA involved and so on, but there's no evidence that is. And the we've had of people getting, for instance, their Onion websites compromised, there's actually very solid explanations for why. I mean, one example is, they went to, there's like 400 or so websites, well, specifically .onion addresses that they took down. And of course, when people looked into this, they realized, oh, hang on a second, this is actually mostly malware copies of existing Onion sites. So essentially, suppose someone runs, Silk Road version 2, someone else's 10 different .onion addresses appear to be Silk version 2 and are trying to go and steal passwords. And also, as it turns out, all these sites, they were all hosted by one single provider, which is well known to accept Bitcoins. Much more plausible story is very simple. They got a Safina or whatever provider, scanned through their servers, got all the Onion sites right on there, and that was that. Equally, you'd kind of expect if they took down that many sites, you'd arrest more than 20 people. This isn't much of a break, and it looks much more of a break that has nothing to do with Tor itself.
Right, and of course the code itself is open source, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it gets a ton of review.
Hmm.
But, you know, what's interesting with Tor is itself is not enough. You have to be able to go trust the people who are promising not to go keep logs.
Right, right. That's a good point.
And
So
that's
you don't
where
know if
the
the exit node.
centralization of Tor is an advantage. You know,
Okay.
you can do Sybil attacks, where for example, the CIA goes and sets a ton of nodes and becomes the main provider of bandwidth. You know, we recently had, yesterday or the day before, some group by the name of Lizard Squad try to set up 3,000 Tor relays. Well, of course, it was very quickly detected by the people who run Tor, and they collectively allowed those relays onto the network. You know, traffic ever actually went through them.
Right. So what are you finding is most interesting about this conference as you're talking about it? Are there enough sufficiently non-technical people there that are able to understand a lot of these concepts and these ideas that you're talking about? Because I imagine to a lot of people at home, if they're not clued up on this stuff, it's just going to sound very alien to them, no?
Yeah, well, I think a conference like this is much more oriented towards the community themselves. I don't get many people go to 31C because they want to learn about crypto unless they already sense what crypto is about. You know, I mean, you certainly get people who are analysts who are non-technical to come here, but it's not like this is an end people.
Yeah, but I think surely it's important that more people understand this, right? Because security is a chain. It's only as strong as its weakest link. And it's very difficult to be anonymous if there aren't enough other people around you who also share that same intention. You can't be anonymous on your own. There has been
But
a
I mean,
recent push.
remember, this is, in a sense, an industry conference. You know, it's hackers oriented towards hackers.
Yeah, yeah.
They want to meet together and talk to each other and make new connections, you know, get work done.
Yeah, but I just
One
wonder
thing
whether or
I've
not.
seen,
Go ahead, Jamie.
one thing I've one thing I've seen from the tweets that have been coming out of there is they've been showing a lot of things that are broken that people need to be aware of, and things that aren't broken or that we're not aware of that are broken. Like PGP, I've noticed, has been on the list of things that the NSA hasn't been able to break, as far as we know. And there's been just a small list of things that aren't compromised.
Yeah, well, I mean, that list isn't really a surprise in some senses. I mean, we know what programs have had a lot of scrutiny, what software has had a lot of scrutiny, and that list is fairly small. So getting a confirmation from the agencies themselves, you know, in the form of the links, is nice to see, but not entirely unexpected.
Yeah,
Theo,
that's true.
Theo, do you have any thoughts on any of this stuff? Theo, can you hear us? I'm just looking at a picture of Richard Stallman. What was he like? Did you get to see Stallman?
Actually, talk to him.
Say again?
He's true.
We're having some connection issues, I think, with Peter. We're not able to hear him properly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. We're just wondering if you...
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, to Stallman's talk myself. It was right in the early morning. I was here pretty late to people. But, you know, I think what's more interesting there is how his leaks vindicate him. all the stuff that's open source, or I really should say, all the stuff that's secure is open source. Nothing in the list of things that have compromised, that are closed source, that don't have code fully available, don't have a review. Everything is breakable and it's exploitable. Whereas the model that does work is open source software that everyone can reach your freedoms. I mean, people have been saying this for, what, 20 years, 20, 25 now? That's what works.
Yeah, and of course one of the things that Richard Stallman is famous for saying is that if you don't understand the software will be in control of you because you won't understand how it's working. But as I think you quoted a couple of weeks ago on your Twitter, even with Bitcoin, you still have to have trust in the algorithm itself. So you still need to trust that proof of work works. We can never escape the need for trust completely because not everyone's going to be able to understand the code well enough to be able to scrutinize every single line.
You'd have to quote yourself to be exact, but I would rather say the issue with Bitcoin is that it is not secure in a graphic sense. You are trusting miners to some extent, keep it secure. The software, though, you don't need to trust the algorithm. You can verify that it works by reading.
Yeah, but I'm still worried that we're kind of outsourcing a lot of that trust to a kind of a technorati kind of class. I mean, people like you do, and particularly Andreas as well, do a good job of communicating a lot of the technical stuff to a way that I think the enthusiastic users like me can understand. But then in turn, we've still got to relay that to the people on the street that are still relying on Visa and MasterCard to do all of their payments.
I'm really worried about that. In fact, I would say there's a huge advantage with things that are not broken, in the sense that truth is lies. It's very easy to go and then tell the world, convince the journalists and so on. Sure, there's layers there, but it's trust that's not in one person. Any one person can show why something's flawed. Flawed requires conspiracy of many people, assuming that the code is open. If the code isn't open, the conspiracy can be very small. If it is open, the conspiracy has to be enormous.
Yeah, so one of the great things about the Bitcoin protocol is that it's security in numbers, that the more people, that the more diverse the network and the more spread out it is, particularly culturally as well as geospatially, the harder it is to bring down the system because you would have to collude, you would have to social engineer such that you could try to outpace the network.
Well, that's specifically talk about mining. I mean, currently our incentives are a bit broken, so there are incentives to centralize into larger and larger pools. But the converse of that, for the review of the source code, that's true of all cryptographic applications. That's just as true as GNU PG as it is with Bitcoin. There isn't the financial incentive the direct financial incentive to break things, but the review process is still the same. And there's still hundreds of people who look at parts of the GNU PG source code. It's not a perfect process, but it is the same rough process.
And of course, one of the great things about Bitcoin is the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal section, which you've been quite a famous contributor to over the years. And recently you've proposed something called BIP65, I understand. Are you able to say anything about the check lock time verify? Did I get that right? Check lock time verify. Yes, I did.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd go point out I'm not by any means one of the bigger VIP contributors. BIP65 is one that I've ever implemented. But on that topic, what's interesting about check lock time verify isn't so much what it is, but rather it's sort of the obvious way to do something. Basically, it just makes it possible to take a transaction output and lock it until a certain time is reached, or potentially some other condition is met. But what's interesting about that is the way you tell people about the nlock time feature, and they assume nlock time works that way. Whereas in reality, what actually is going on is nlock time makes a transaction impossible to mine until a certain point in time. But the money the transaction spends could still be spent by a different transaction at any point in time. So we could say check lock time verify is making Bitcoin be what people assume is. And equally another way to put it is you say it's a minimum viable change in terms of the politics situation. Because everyone agrees that that's how nlock time should have worked. So getting the consensus to actually implement the change is pretty easy.
Well, you've put in a pull request, have you not? Because you're doing this via Viacoin, and that's Drax project. We've had Drac on the show before to talk about it. And one of the most interesting things I find about your philosophy, Peter, and also Drax too, is that you very much see blockchains as proof of publication. You weave the blockchain into a much larger, longer narrative about publication itself and the database structure. And we've recently interviewed Preston, who I know is watching this. He launched Eris, and he said in a blog post very well, he said that the blockchain is a structure, it's not a currency. And one of the use cases for check lock time verify is this idea of things like inheritance, for example. We've got a diagram on the screen right now where parents can leave their children money by saying don't let these bitcoins be transferred until either some time in the future by using something called Unix time, or at some block height or other. So it's kind of like a smart contract, but you're building it into the blockchain itself, aren't you? The mining process.
Yeah, I mean, something to keep in mind is check lock verify is quite separate to proof of publication. I wouldn't link to talks. Rather, I would go say that just an example of something where we could make an improvement to Bitcoin. We saw opportunity, and we decided to go and do it.
Yeah, and I think what's important about what you and Drac are doing is that you're taking the emphasis away from the money itself, and you're placing it firmly into the more social sphere.
Well, I mean, I'd actually recast a bit more specific than that. I'd say more of a discussion about exactly how upgrade Bitcoin. I think whether or not you see that as being money, well, it depends on what you do with it. A lot of proof of publication applications are very money focused. Other ones aren't. It's just a feature, and you can choose how to use it.
Does check lock time verify? Does it need, op return space, or is it going to cause some kind of bloat issue, or what are some of the?
It's just an opcode.
What now?
It's just an opcode.
Okay.
I mean,
so it's really simple.
In the scripting language, do things like check a or if a value on the stack is 1, take this branch. If it's 0, take another. Or add 2 numbers. Code that says if the transaction output.
Yeah, so it's just a script basically, Theo.
But the main thing is that it's good that it's relatively simple and straightforward. It's not something totally off the wall and requires a whole lot of a really large script, and that's good because then it probably is more resilient and it's feasible to do it on the Bitcoin blockchain. But I guess now you can test it on Viacoin. I haven't. I'll have to just test it myself, I guess.
The thing is, the actual implementation is extremely simple. You know, we're basically talking like 5 lines of, and we do need enormous level of scrutiny to ensure 5 lines of code are correct. So,
Oh, yeah, actually, we're kind of
unviable
losing
change is
you.
useful and can get reviewed.
Right. So basically, you're saying it's like 5 lines of code. It's very, very easy for the other people to go in and scrutinize it and test it. It's very elegant,
Yeah.
in other words. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my tons of comments, like, it's kind of the numbers.
Oh, I'm afraid we're losing Peter. But one of the things I would like to draw people's attention to something that I thought was very interesting in this article in Cointelegraph, where Peter was talking, was this idea of micropayments. So this passage got my attention. If Alice, Bob, and Charlie all have micropayment channels with a shared hub, they can effectively send money to each other instantly and trustlessly by sending a small amount to the hub and having the hub, in turn, resend it to the final destination. This enormously increases the scalability as all these transactions of Bitcoin, as all these transactions happen off the blockchain, yet the hub never actually has control of the money. So I kind of think I understand that. I might not if I was, tested and put on the spot. But that sounds very interesting because we've recently been talking a lot about the microtransaction potential of the blockchain and the fact that, with companies like ChangeTip, they've been tempted to do everything off blockchain just because when people only send each other, pennies, it's not really worth it because the transaction fees are too high.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I always find it interesting how people, the microtransaction capability of Bitcoin, not understanding when blockchain itself can't do that. The Bitcoin blockchain has terrible n-squared scaling, and that's a fundamental problem that can't be, directly solved within the model of Bitcoin. By doing your transaction on a layer above Bitcoin, micropayment are one such system, and it just builds on the fact that, listen, Bob, set up a payment channel between, where once you deposit an initial amount of money into the channel, how much actually can be adjusted instantly with a simple signature. And that signature only has to be between the two of them. One time to finalize this channel and make it into a real transaction, that's when the rest of Bitcoin is involved. But all the payments before that are between those two parties. There's no trust involved. Alice to only give Bob the amount of money she wanted to. And once you have that building block, well, if Alice can give Bob money, Bob can give Charlie that money, and Bob is intended for analysis. And now everyone's sending money between each other.
Well, that sounds really great. I'm actually very happy that's actually going to be something that we can look forward to on the horizon. So, Peter, look, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We have been having a few sound issues. Just to sum up, just because I don't want to this to be frustrating for everyone at home, I'd love to have you on again. Are you going to be sticking around at the conference for another day or two? I think it ends tomorrow, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow, and if I fly the day after the conference ends. So there's definitely...
Cool. Where are you off to next?
I am going back to Canada.
Okay, great. You're going back to Toronto, no?
Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. We have a few friends there. So, look, I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about it, hopefully on a better internet connection if we can. So it'd be really good to hear from you again. But I just wanted to say, thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully we can break this discussion out amongst the group now.
Yep, absolutely.
Lovely.
We'll talk later.
Great. Thanks a lot, Peter. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.
Cool. So that was Peter
Chris,
Todd.
what you were talking.
Yeah, go ahead, Theo.
Yeah. So, Chris, what you were talking about that about kind of like the techno elite, actually that's, to be honest, that's what from the outside, I've never actually been to a CCC conference, but there are kind of elitist style hackers there. They kind of like think they're the elite or whatever. It's not really something for your average Joe necessarily, but that's okay because there are those things that I've been talking about, crypto parties. So if you just go to cryptoparty.in, and even they use that as a domain hack. So it's like cryptoparty.in/Frankfurt for my city, and then you can find one in your city, or you can just go there. And they've got a lot of tools for anyone from beginner to advanced. They've got also really simple tutorials about how to use OTR, how to use Tor, how to use PGP. And what's also cool about CryptoParty is there's no organization, there's no one behind it, and they made it a little different in that you're not supposed to ask for any donations even. It's like anti-donation, anti-money totally. So it's just like a resource. They also have PDFs on how you can organize your own crypto party in your own city. So it's kind of like a meetup where you just share PGP keys, but also people that know what they're doing a little bit just kind of like raise their hand and say, okay, I'm gonna do PGP in this corner. We're gonna do Tor over here. We're gonna introduce people to Bitcoin over here, maybe. Sometimes they talk about Bitcoin a little bit, and so on, or at least the ones I was at. And so that's pretty cool. So you can learn how to use OTR or whatever, and you can then exchange code words with real people so that you can confirm their identity when you're online. So that's a pretty cool practice way, and that's more, in my opinion, that's more for your average Joe. That's designed for anybody from a total beginner to someone that also knows a lot. Well, they would probably go there and help people, and they probably would meet like-minded people. So I think that's a really good site if anyone is interested in encryption or anything like that. I always point them in that direction. It's unfortunate that the Todd's, maybe they're like jamming the airways or whatever, the governments. But
yeah, I think it's
anyway, there was. Yeah, but there was something on his Twitter that was, and it was something like, make sure to generate your Bitcoin keys 100 meters under the earth. Something about gravity channel or something.
Well, no, this is
like
it's the Babbage difference machine. Here it is, the difference engine. Pro tip, keep your difference engine at least 100 meters underground whilst generating Bitcoin keys to avoid gravity emission side channel attacks. You see, you don't want people snooping on your gravity.
Well, I really like that because, well, yeah, well, I like that. Well, I mean, I did sound wallet. I was thinking of like, electromagnetic attacks on people's private keys, and then all your private keys are destroyed, but you have, your spare tire, your sound wallet on a record, and then, it's still there, or some weird stuff like that. But I really like, topics like that because it's interesting. I mean, it's not maybe feasible right now, or it's just too much trouble to do. What was it, a side gravitational attack? But
well, that's just somebody with
weirder things have happened. I mean, they might be.
Yeah, it's just somebody with a seismometer, isn't it? It's just someone with like a Richter scale, like you use for earthquakes. You're just listening for the
right. Exactly. Well, I mean, they could be reading our brain waves right now. I mean, we've got these cameras on us, and then they kind of can tell our mood, and then they will, according to what our alpha waves are sending, they will, customize the advertisements to what our mood is, depending on how hot this part of the head is, or this part of the head. Or for me, it's really easy. They'll be like, okay, here we go. This is activated here. And then, they might send you something. So we'll have to like encrypt our video to, prevent our brainwaves from being detected when we're going online or something like that.
I think Peter Todd is right that the best form of security is openness and transparency. I was saying this is a good opportunity to introduce Leslie to the World Crypto Network and the audience at home. Say hi.
Hi. Yeah, actually,
hi,
hi. I was actually thinking about the whole the Technorati thing because for me it almost sounds like it's like when the Bible came out, and then only the priests and only the very few people who could read were actually privy to the information that was in there, and then you had to sort of have it told to you by someone else, and they would be interpreting the words, and they would be interpreting what meaning was behind the words. And of course this is not quite the same, but it is somewhat the same, because people sort of have to take people's word for it. They have to say, well, you know, it seems like there's a lot of people here that believe in this, so I'm going to use this antivirus program or something because this sounds right. I mean, I have no idea which one is the good one, but I sort of just see, okay, there's more people here that use this, and this is fine. And I think that there is a big, it really means something to, at some point, open up for the public to not just like open up avenues of learning, because you have Code Academy, you have all these different kinds of sort of websites that do, you know, teach at even like a very low level, even for kids. But also to incentivize it, because people won't do it unless they feel that there is a need to do something. I mean, people won't get out of the couch unless there is actual need to go out and actively learn this stuff. I mean, for me personally, it's like I only learned it because of necessity, and I think that the driving force, to sort of tap into that and figure out what would incentivize people to actually learn, because we want people to understand it. We want people to be able to even see, you know, if someone comes out with a code and someone, you know, if there's a million people to understand it, then it would be very quick to see, oh wait, there's something wrong with this. There's you know, something's off. Instead of having, you know, maybe 1,000 people worldwide, and then they all have to go through, like, do the peer review and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I think it's really a really important thing to not just have this sort of clan of people that are explaining things to everyone else. And yeah, it kind of reminds me, like, you know, the Middle Ages. This is like the Middle Ages of blockchain technology, I guess.
Jamie,
yeah, we needed Gutenberg.
Well, we don't we have that with the blockchain? The blockchain is slightly different to the printing press because it's not very economical to print or publish on the blockchain. But what you can do with the blockchain is you can do proof of publication. You can prove that a document exists, and that document can be like a smart contract. Preston said something to me interestingly the other day, and he said that even the Bitcoin protocol itself is a smart contract, that you can think of all of these different scripts and the things that go into the blockchain as being smart contracts themselves. In other words, a declaration of intent. And the reason why Theo's point was interesting about, you know, the side channel attack is that Leslie and yesterday I saw Leslie off at Gatwick Airport here in London, and the first thing you see when you get to the departures area are these big cameras. Like, there are cameras all over the ceiling, and these cameras have little lights on them that swirl around, and that's to get you to look at them. That's what Leslie speculated, and I think it's pretty obvious, so that they can capture your face, so that they can grab all of that information. And if you think about it, dark energy is constantly coming through the Earth, right? We can't see it. We know it's there because the equations seem to suggest that it exists. So, you know, it could just be that we're being seen from a very, very long distance away. We're getting all these X-rays coming through, and then that's being consolidated on a graph with our facial scans. And every time you persist some data in someone's database, you are providing them with an opportunity to profit from it at some later stage. So long as they have it in their possession, it's under their jurisdiction and under their control.
Well, just facial expressions and stuff. I mean, if you ever looked into the neuro-linguistic programming and stuff, and like salespeople, they know how to read a person's face just by, if you say something to somebody and if they look up or whatever, you can tell, well, yeah, they're considering it because they're looking up. Otherwise, if they're like, look down, they're just dismissing what you're saying and aren't interested. You know, there's those facial cues like that. And, you know, and then there's the obvious ones. If somebody's smiling, they're probably happy. And if they're, you know, tensed up, there's things like that they can capture that with a camera.
But one of the points that I was making yesterday when Leslie and I were talking about these cameras in the airport was that we've got to come up with a paradigm that replaces this one, where being open doesn't mean vulnerable, right? That I can be as open as I can, and them having that information doesn't empower them. Now, at the moment, I'm working on this personal pet project called On Time, which is like a self-surveillance technique where I'm surveilling myself, doing all the things that the NSA would be doing, and then habitually timestamping it at intervals, checkpointing it in the blockchain, just using lots of little Git repos and some scripts and something called Evernote, which is like a note-taking app, lets you store pictures and recordings. And I'm doing that because I think, look, if you want to get over this, sometimes it's counterintuitive. Sometimes to overtake an empire or to bring a civilization down, you have to let it crumble from within by understanding it better than it understands itself. And I think the reason why we have this mass surveillance culture is because the NSA cares about us more than we care about ourselves. So they put all the work into caring about us. They give us all the attention, but we don't use that data to make ourselves smarter about who we are. And then you've got a problem. And I just want to make one final point about the learned helplessness. And one of the things that I've been noticing, I'm not going to mention any names, so I'm getting into lots of trouble recently by calling people out, but let's just say there's a blog post by a company that is data gathering, and then one of the lines in that blog post is, you know, if you want to, check the privacy policy, but that's a headache and it's going to take you a long time and we don't want you to have to think about it, right? And it's like, no, don't do that. Don't talk down to your customer and then make them feel weak, right? You have to empower them. You have to help them up. And you have to say, no, read this because it's important. Know that we could change this on a whim. And when we say we're not going to sell your data, what we actually kind of mean is we could sell the company with the data inside of it. And then, of course, it's out of our hands. You know, be explicit. Help give them knowledge to make them capable of thinking for themselves so that they're able to make better decisions. It's all about helping people make better decisions, I think, personally.
I think it's really... Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like Leslie had said before, the incentive to get people to do it. I mean, right now we have, you know, by all logical means, nobody should be using Facebook, but they're still huge. The incentive to get people to just quit giving out their information and their personal life on social media like that everybody knows is surveilled, and even if you type something in and don't post it, it's surveilled.
Yeah.
So getting people the incentive to stop doing that. You know, back in the 80s, if somebody, they used to try like hell when I was in high school and in grade school to get us to write a journal in a paper notebook. And it's like, that's frickin' nuts. That was a waste of time. Why would I ever do anything like that? I didn't want to do that. And now they've got me trained to type all this shit on a computer and share with my friends, and the government has open access to it. It's
the establishment. It's
crazy.
established. You're establishing social norms. You're setting up behaviors. It's basically soft colonialism. That's not my term. That's Vinay Gupta's term, and I think he means it slightly differently. There's a point that Vinay made the other day, actually, really well. He said that the world economy is basically set. The world economy at the moment is that you've got capitalism in the West stacked on top of socialism in China, stacked on top of feudalism in Africa, and that's why you have this presentation layer on the top that looks very kind of, you know, democratic, you know, democracy or whatever we want to fantasize calling it, but actually it's just a fraud, right? It's a fraud because it's propped up by a background of a system that we are becoming ever more aware of thanks to the internet, and that awareness makes us responsible because now that we have that information, it makes us kind of guilty, you know, guilty. Like, what do you do now that you've got this information? If everyone's learning is their own responsibility, what is the responsibility of those that have the knowledge? What is the responsibility of the scientists? Because it's all very well saying, well, the average layperson should just be more responsible and learn what they're doing. But what is the responsibility of the scientist and the expert and the person in the position? Don't they have a responsibility too? Leslie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing, because I don't think anyone, I'm a hardcore voluntarist, and I don't think anyone ought to do anything. I don't think anyone has any responsibility towards anyone. I think everyone individually has responsibility to check themselves, check their privilege, check themselves, and check what they are, like what information people are giving them. Like, I wouldn't go, you know, if you go and buy something in a store, like you would check the store before to see have they gotten good reviews. Like even we have all this kind of like stuff with Yelp and Trustpilot and all that kind of stuff where people actually do help each other and say, well, this is bad, don't go there, they have fucking glass in their drinks or something, it's like, and I think it's very important for people to take back that responsibility and say, I can't just trust that someone, Steve said that, Steve's authority on this, and he said that all of this is fine, I'm just going to trust him every time, I'm not going to have my eyes open, and it's like, it reminds me about that thing that when Google, Apple, some Apple phone and the maps in the Apple phone were like fucked up or something, and then like someone drove into a fucking harbor or something because like the map said there was fine. It's like, open your freaking eyes, man. It's a harbor. There's no road there. Just stop, because you have your eyes and you are a person, and you have to trust yourself. And having that sort of idea taken, like really internalized, that's going to take a while because people have been taught to be helpless. They have been taught, you have government sort of taking care of everything for them. They're like, don't worry about it, we'll do it. You don't need to do that. That's fine. And people are like, fine, I don't need to do it. I don't fucking have time. I have kids and I have a job and I have stuff to do, and they'll take care of it. And by the time, when it's too late, suddenly they don't know how to do anything. And it's kind of like with the coding, that you didn't learn anything because someone else was doing it for you. They were making the apps, they were making the Facebooks, and suddenly Facebook is shit, everything's shit. You want to make your own Facebook, you're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to fix this problem. And people have to see the severity of this, the severity of the situation, that if they don't act now, that something will happen. And also look at the legitimacy of the people that are saying whatever they're saying, or the legitimacy of any authority, because the only actual authority is yourself, and whatever legitimacy that you're giving is something that you give. So if someone is tricking you or cheating you, you are somehow giving them allowance to do that because you haven't checked whatever they're doing. You haven't had your eyes open. So people really have to take back some kind of sense of, okay, wait, I'm going to just think about this myself. Does this look right? Does this person look trustworthy? Does this app look trustworthy? Should I put this up on the internet? So yeah.
But we don't know what we don't know. So what if someone doesn't know that they're supposed to know that they're being surveilled because of a difference in culture? Like, it's largely arbitrary that a whole bunch of guys were brought up in the 80s surrounded by computers like I was, who were fortunate enough to have forward-thinking parents that sat us down and said, learn this. For me, it was just voluntary because I really enjoyed it. But I know some of my friends, their parents were trying to get them into computers because they could see this was where they were going, that the school was essentially teaching them skills that by the time they graduated would already be out of date. And I think that's happening even now. It's slowly changing, and kids are being taught how to code. But when they're being taught how to code at school, they're being how to code applications. They're not being taught the full stack from the hardware upwards. They're just being taught how to import libraries of other people's code. They don't know how machine code works. They don't know what binary is. They certainly don't learn the hardware unless they get a Raspberry Pi. And if you are a parent of a child, I'd say over 7, you definitely need to be investing in a Raspberry Pi kit, and check out Arduino as well, which is more geared towards robotics, because this is like using a knife and fork these days. This is the modern equivalent. We are changing, and programming gives you the ability to control nature, to converse with nature itself. You're able to send instructions to the physics of the universe. It's a very, very powerful thing. And if you don't understand this in the future, I think you're going to be the bronze-souled people of the Republic. You're not going to be up there with the philosopher kings and queens.
This is really funny because we're talking about like parents who are trying to teach their kids to code, and they're going trying to oh, this is so exciting, look at this nice book. What kids really want to do is what their parents don't want them to do. So they're going to go out and buy beer, or they're going to go out and buy cigarettes or drugs or something because they can't do it. It's dangerous, So maybe the solution to all of this is to make coding this really dangerous thing that makes it sound like it's someone that if you do it like you're super like a criminal or something, and then everyone will be like, oh, this sounds really cool. I want to do that. I want to be like that. So sort of make it look at what actually incentivizes people. What kind of incentive is it that drives them to do something? Is it because they want to be part of a community? Is it because they want to be cool? Is it because they want to look cool? And have that sort of added on to whatever you want to spread. It's like, it reminds me, like there was like a Simpsons episode where someone was like, they had like this big trampoline, they didn't know what the fuck to do with it because they didn't want it in their garden, and someone was like, just put a fucking lock on it. And it was stolen like 2 days later or something, because you have to find out, like, what would get this job done. And maybe it would be to say, oh, this is like really super exciting, and you're not supposed to do this. If parents told kids they're not supposed to do something, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So parents should tell their kids, don't learn coding, don't learn encryption because it's bad, and then maybe they will be like, oh, if I learn encryption, then I teach adults English sometimes, and one of my students said, my teenager asked if I can buy Bitcoin with PaySafe cards, and I was like, yeah, you can do it. The markup is really high, but it's possible. So kids are already, hearing on the playground about Bitcoin and what you can do about it and stuff. But I have to go actually, but I want to show something really funny because we're talking about techno elite and stuff, and I'm not really sure what I have to think. It's a little bit okay. So basically, someone sent me these cards. Have you seen them before?
I love it.
It's like baseball cards.
It comes in a pack. It reminds me of when I used to buy baseball cards, because I actually did when I was a kid. I didn't get a chewing gum in this one though, but it's called Crypto.
Oh, rip off.
Crypto Community Cards, and so I got in my pack Mark Capellas, they're really glossy too, and they're really nice. And on the back it has a quote by him. So we've got I've got Gavin, so I've got a core developer.
What's his quote? The cold wallet had a leaky hot wallet.
Here we go. Bitcoin is designed to bring us back to the decentralized currency of the people. That's his quote. Oh. So I've got one core dev. I'll trade you. I've got a Jordan Fish.
For a scammer.
That's a crypto campaign. Is an altcoin trader. I've got a Charlie Shrem.
Are any of us in here?
And I've got Andreas too. So I don't know if that's like the whole set, or if you get another pack, there's some more. But
must be releasing more.
I really like them. I really like them. I mean, we have to also ask: are we making a cult of personality or something out of some of these people or not? But on the other hand, I do like these. Maybe I like cult of personalities. I don't know, but they're just cool. I don't know why. They're really glossy, and I opened it and I was like, this is really funny. This is great. But I was thinking you could make these for learning, like PGP or something. Like I'll trade you one PGP for one OTR or something like that. Cool. And on the back,
brilliant idea.
Yeah, right. Right, and on the back it has like the basic strengths and weaknesses of it or something like that. You know what I mean? Or it tells you a little bit about it. Or, I mean, you could also do one with like altcoins, but the pack would be, the whole set would be really big, But you could also do it more for like learning kind of. And I think that could be something interesting we could look into, a kind of like little card set like this. But I really liked getting this nice pack. So I forgot who gave it to me.
You should tweet me because I think I might know someone that might be able to help us print those. If you had an idea, like you could make like a mock-up of a certain amount, and we can try and print them like as a limited edition. It's going to be the first edition. It's going to be worth a lot of money at some point.
Right. Right. So I'll show you another.
Theo's just
so while we're at it, so I've got another
for the next edition.
Yeah.
So look. So just before I go, so I've got another card game. It's not related to Bitcoin directly, but this is so I got this for supporting, there's this group that in my area that's making a retro computer museum, and if you supported the crowdfunding, then you got the game. Okay, just a minute. And then, and so what you do, it's a basic card game based on the computers. I can't really explain it anyway, but it's pretty cool. But you could do the same thing with different, learning things, or I don't know, or different algorithms or something like that, and make it kind of fun and easy to use. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you very much, Theo.
Thank you. Great idea. Thanks.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Brilliant. Love it.
So Something in the Q&A, Ajan has been with us and he's been asking us some questions. He says that is Jamie's beard to block facial recognition by cameras? Now the interesting thing...
I need to get a beard now.
The interesting thing about the face recognition, particularly the one that the British government use for your passports and stuff, is they actually check the ratio of your eyes to your forehead, so it doesn't matter what happens lower down in the face. And I had no idea it was unique in that way that you could actually check it, but that's apparently what they do. Now, when I've been told by someone who knows about these kind of things that when you walk through an airport, normally, or walk through any building, you'll normally only be caught from a certain angle. So what they have to do in order to consolidate the data, in order to work out where you've been all over the country, once you pass through border control and you've got your face metrics are inside of your passport and you scan your passport and they scan your face, in order to keep tracking you throughout the territory, they have to actually bring lots of footage together and triangulate, because just having like a pixelated version of half of my face isn't going to be enough for the facial recognition to number crunch it. So there's a few things in order for the territory to be terrifying. Remember that those two are very similar. They need a bunch more data. And they need all that data to be digital. The problem that the governments have at the moment is a lot of CCTV footage is still analog. It's still running off of, the industrial tapes, and so it's not digital. So I think where a lot of these surveillance people want to get to is automatic digitalization of all closed circuit television footage, so that it can be put into large data warehouses. It can be sold. Those private companies can sell that data on for a profit, and then they can. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, okay, cool. So they put all that data into a data warehouse, and then you basically crunch numbers and work out, okay, this citizen here was over here, and then they traveled over here, and then they traveled over here, and then they would have the whereabouts of every single person within the country. So my project at the moment is to bring these same tools to everyday people, right? So that you can just self-identify within a community, and your community can issue their own passports to one another and issue their own IDs. And it's not our job to tell you what you should do with this technology. It's only our job really to explain how it works and to try and educate you and to be a point of source, that your origin that you can go to if you need any kind of help. So that way, if you just happen to be born, under the rule of a tyrant, you don't have to stay there. You can choose your own tyrant, as it were. You can go to another community that perhaps is more sympathetic to your views, or one that you share your values with, and just spend time with people that share the same ethos and the same values as you do. Like, if you're going to spend all this time with people, make sure you get on with each other, because you're going to be living with these people. You're going to be right by them, So this is kind of one of my projects at the moment.
That's interesting. I think the need to identify yourself when you're traveling and stuff is kind of a strange concept. Why they need to know who the hell I am just to go to a different part of a geographic location. Why it matters. Can you explain that a little bit, Chris?
Well, the reason they would claim that they have to do it is because of terrorism. Terraphilia is just one word now. It's terrorists and pedophiles. It's the scariest examples they can possibly come up with. Now, quite normally, when you hear anarchists and libertarians talk, that default response that I often hear is, well, the only reason you have organized crime, terrorists and pedophilia is because of the government organizations in the first place, which create a fertile environment for those types of activities to thrive. But I don't think we need to rely on an argument like that. I think there's a stronger one, which is that the act of observing someone will automatically change their behavior. And so if what you're looking for is, a productive group of people that are going to go around and truck, barter and exchange and produce things and create art and all the things that make life worth living, then just surveilling them all the time and monitoring them is not only downright creepy and control freakery, it's also going to get you the opposite of what you're looking for, which is a peaceful, just society. Assuming, of course, that that is what they want. I mean, I hope that's what they want. I'm hoping that this is just a naive attempt at trying to get something like a global justice. I'm hoping it's not a more sinister conspiratorial element where actually it's all about control. Because one of the things
it's about control.
Right, okay, I know, I thought that too, but I didn't want to say it. You know, one of the things that Plato brings up in Book 2 of the Republic is this idea of, or Glaucon, the character Glaucon, under the auspices of Plato, brings up the ring of Gyges. And this idea is the idea that a tyrant is essentially someone who wants to see without being seen. That you want to be able to watch everyone else from behind like a screen so that you can't be seen. And this is like the cloak of invisibility that you put on this ring and it makes you invisible. And then I think...
Well, you know, I just went through Lysander Spooner's Constitution of No Treason, I think it is. And it was very interesting. And have you been through that, Chris?
No, I haven't.
I think you'd find it interesting, but he talks about the secretive voting and how governments collude in secret, and you know, all the secrecy behind government, and then how the people come to power and then, you know, claim this authority, but it's just a secretive group that voted. There's no actual record of who they voted for because it was done in secret. So there's really no proof that a said majority or whatever voted for him, and even if there is, it would be a tyranny of the majority. So, you know, it was a really interesting thing to look at. So I suggest that people take a look at that too, and it really makes me think that this whole government thing is just about control.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right, unfortunately, Jamie, as much as I wish it weren't true. This is a really good blog post that I tweeted out the other day by Richard Gendall Brown, who's a friend of mine in London, and he wrote this blog post all about identity, and one of the points he makes towards the end of the post is that identity is the new money. That essentially, if I could boil all this down, I might be constructing him slightly here, so make sure you read this post for yourself. Let's see what it's called, actually. It's called Identity and the Blockchain, okay? And so one of the interesting things is that Richard actually comes from a background of working for I think for IBM, and so he kind of has a lot of corporate experience. And one of the reasons why he says the identity is so important is because if you're going to start exchanging tokens, what you're really exchanging is debt from person to person. You're essentially making Citibank go into debt to person A, and then when you give those tokens to person B, Citibank is now in debt to person B. And that if you keep exchanging these tokens without Citibank's knowledge, eventually when you get through to the last person who goes to Citibank and tries to claim something on deposit, Citibank will turn around and go, yeah, but who are all the other people in between? And why should I honor this token? Right? How do I know that this hasn't gone through a whole layer of terrorism and money laundering? And so really what Citibank need is they need to guarantee. Now, one of the ways you could do this is just by using PGP signatures, where you just get the bank every link in the chain, every time you pass it between someone and someone else, they just sign it and say, yes, we vouch for this person. But what this boils down to, well, let's look at the word identity for a start. The word identity just simply means identical. Is it identical to something that I've seen before? Who are you? Who have you been in the past? And are you still the same person? Are the behaviors that you've exhibited in the past and that we're able to identify going to be the same kind of behaviors that we can expect from you in the future? Because I think money is really all about permission. It's about the permission we give one another to move across a distance, to discover, to explore. Now, in the tribal times, there were many tribes who wouldn't accept you in if you reciprocated too early. So if the tribe gives you a gift and you just give them a gift back, it's very, very difficult to integrate yourself into the tribe because they want you to go into debt to them. They want to build a relationship with you. And if you just reciprocate straight away, essentially what you're saying to the tribe is, we're quits now. We're done. We're not really friends. Now, in order to leave the tribe, you would need something that had universal value everywhere, that no matter where you went, someone would need it. And this idea of money as this emergent property, something that holds its value all of the time, something that is liquid, that can travel, that has the property of currency, starts to just become, well, whatever the people agree it is, whatever the people say it is. And that requires empathy. It requires understanding the universal human condition, that this thing that I understand about myself is true for every human, no matter where they are. And it's by understanding that universal truth that allows us to distinguish ourselves and flourish in our uniqueness. And so really, I think this is, I mean, I'm embellishing a lot on what Richard's saying, but that's certainly the kind of thoughts that he created in my mind. And so his point that identity is the new money, this is really, for me, one of the most interesting things of all. And he also mentions a really, really good book called Digital Identity. Oh, so there's Digital Identity on Conference, and then there's this book by David Birch, which I'll just link to here, Identity is the New Money. And so I just got that on the Kindle, and I'm going to read that very, very soon. Thoughts? No?
Not really. I don't want to use my identity as a currency.
But I think the point is it gets used as a currency whether you like it or not. Like once two or more people agree on some information about you, that's it. You've got reputation now, and that reputation, like you can't stop people from coming to you. So all you can do, you could be like Zarathustra, right? In Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. You could go into a cave and live like a recluse, but I don't think it's possible for you to completely divorce yourself from society, because as soon as you're born, you're surrounded by meaning. You can't even look after yourself for the first few years of your life. You're completely beholden to your mother. In fact, if it wasn't for the maternal instinct, none of us would be here at all. So you've got to have this process where you're born into a world without anyone asking you first, like you're just born without permission, and yet you are still responsible, response-able. You're still able to respond to what's around you. And I think the first thing you have the opportunity to respond to when you're born is all of the meaning, the tools, the language, the context, the culture, because that's what you're searching for. So Kant makes this a brilliant point in, I think he makes it in Critique of Pure Reason, where I'm paraphrasing heavily here, but like if your car breaks down, you don't think to yourself, well, the laws of physics must have stopped working. You automatically assume that something mechanical has gone wrong with the car, and that it's either by human error or fault that this is broken. And I think that's an instinct that we all have from the moment we're born. I don't think we ever assume that the laws of physics don't work. I think we understand implicitly by our very existence that the universe has some secrets, that privacy is kind of the default condition of the universe, and it's up to us to try and discover and uncover those through a process of existing. And you can either do that as an artist by being creative, or you can do that as a scientist. But with science, you can only really talk about things that can be tested. Scientists can't really talk about things that are metaphysical or things that can be talked about sensibly but that can't be proven repeatedly over space and time by other people. Whereas then when you have the arts, you do have this creative process. And I'm worried at the moment, particularly with people like us that make content online, that other people seem to find very rewarding. We're just not thinking long term enough, because I think everyone would be very, very upset if all the art disappeared. And yet very few people seem to be willing to pay for the artists to survive. This isn't even about making 10x our investment. We just want the permission to survive. I just need to be able to pay my rent. I just need to be able to pay for my food. And at the moment, it looks as though we're making people happy with these shows, and there are other artists out there that we've been trying to champion who are working very hard. But there's this kind of dichotomy between the person in their mode as a consumer and then the person in their mode as entrepreneur. So imagine if I'm a musician and I'm being underpaid, and then I set up my own music downloading website and I don't pay for other musicians' work, right? So on the one hand, in my role as musician, entrepreneur, and artist, I want to be rewarded. But then as soon as I change into a consumer, I've got this contradiction where I'm not even doing the very thing that I need to sustain my existence. And I think one of the things we've really got to come to terms with in the very near future is just who are we? Are we really friends or not? Do we really want one another to exist or not? because you can't just have, you know, one tier of people, particularly in Silicon Valley, in the VC, the aristocracy, the oligopoly, sort of getting 10 times their investment and playing the markets because they've got all the information, they've got the top level view, and then they're fucking off on yachts in the Pacific and the Cayman Islands, and then everyone else is just left to rot, because even by their own internal logic and reasoning, that's not sustainable, right? Because eventually, once you've killed all the poor, everyone else is dead. Well, who's the new poor now, right? For their model to survive, they need asymmetry. They have to be rich in comparison to someone else. And I've been joking around with Leslie, because one of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, Leslie's actually, I should tell everyone that she's been an audience member, an active participant, an audience member of this show for some time. That's how we met and how we got to know each other. One of the things we've been knocking around just jokingly, and please do not take what I'm about to say seriously, is the question that Plato asks of us in the Republic is not, here you go, here's a book with all the answers in it. That's not what the Republic was meant to be, not in my interpretation of it. The Republic is simply a call to action for everyone to think for themselves. Who should get the land, the money, the guns, the food, right? Whose ideas get to be brought into the material reality? And that this is something, yes, exactly. Everyone says me. But I think in order for society to be tolerable, we do have to ask ourselves these questions. Now, later on in Laws, his last ever dialogue is called Laws, and he puts some corrections essentially into the Republican Laws. And one of the points he makes very early on is that the system that will prevail is the system that's best organized. The organized structures tend to collapse in on less organized structures. And one of the things that I've been toying with, you know, these ideas, because I'm one of these kind of solipsistic thinkers who thinks without boundaries. I forget everything I know, forget morality, forget ethics. Let's just think out of the box. And one of the things we were toying with were these kind of Oculus Rift style concentration camps for tyrants. Please don't take this too literally, okay? Because I understand the gravitas of what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if we could create an incentive structure where the tyrants and the psychopaths were led into these large underground warehouses rigged with Oculus Rifts, with intravenous drips with like soylent in them, you know, with all the nutrients, and you just plug the tyrants in and you do a deal with the tyrant. You say, if you come down into this warehouse, we will give you all the power and control you could ever desire. You can plug into a virtual reality space like the Matrix, and we will let you dominate and slaughter and have control over any artificial intelligent population you want, as long as you don't hurt real honest people, like proper human corporeal beings, right? So you get to have all this control, and that's cool, but you have to do it to some artificial intelligence. You just get to play a game. You get to go in World of Warcraft, and you can cheat if you want. We can give you all the cheat codes you like. And basically, everyone then gets what they want. The tyrant goes underground. Honest, hard-working people, the artists, the engineers, the philosophers, the scientists, they get to inherit the earth. They get to thrive, whilst the tyrant simultaneously gets what they want. There's an idea.
You'd started off talking about what it sounded like getting consistency in one's actions and their beliefs, for as far as like the musician that wants to be paid but yet downloads music and doesn't pay for it. That's been one of the things that I often say, that, you know, when, for morality's sake, if you're going to be consistent in your beliefs, if you don't believe if you don't believe in robbing your neighbor, you know, why is it okay to vote and have the city or the, you know, somebody rob from your neighbor to build a road? You know, if that would be a simple thing, but, you know, delegating rights that you don't have to a political system or whatever, and getting consistent in your belief system and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, that's some things that people struggle with, and you don't even realize a lot of times that those inconsistencies are there unless they're pointed out.
Right. Leslie, what do you think about the Oculus Rift concentration camp for the tyrant? Like a matrix for tyrants? No? Can't hear us? No, no. Okay, well, moving on. If you can hear us, come back to us soon.
If it's voluntary,
Yeah, exactly. If
my
it's
thoughts on
voluntary.
that.
Well, this is what I want to do, is I want to turn the tables on the tyrant. So at the moment, what the tyrant does is they sort of do this kind of rhetorical kind of move where they're like, so the first line of Facebook's privacy policy is your data is yours. Your data belongs to you. And this is very, very duplicitous, because technically that's true, but it's not about who owns the data, it's about who controls the data. And they're not making that explicit. So really what they should be doing is they should be putting this in the marketing literature. They should be taking the legalese, making it presentable and understandable to everyone, because I take as my assumption that the best laws are the ones that are most broadly understood. They're easiest to understand by most of the people, right? Because if you enter a civilization where some people are playing by the rules but some people aren't, what's the incentive for you to play by the rules? What happens is those laws become a technique in which the powerful and the cheaters use it to make predictions about the honest and the hardworking. So anyone, if you're an engineer, you're a scientist, and you're left at the mercy of truth itself, because if a scientist, right, the results you get are the results you get. It's you know, if you're a physicist especially, it's very difficult for you. You have to work hard at being subjective about the objective truth, right? You have to go to extra effort if you've been trained properly. So trying to bring politics into science is often why a lot of scientists end up getting completely disenfranchised and end up leaving science and then spending the rest of their lives bemoaning about all of the bullshit that they had to put up with, because they were constantly trying to be controlled by a bunch of politicians that just wouldn't leave them alone. Now, if you can turn this rhetoric on its head, and if you can use, just like Machiavelli, and I'm also thinking of Schopenhauer in his book about the art of controversy, you know, and one of the things that he was sort of saying is that both of those two writers, I think, are revolutionary texts. They're basically trying to get you to work out some of the weaknesses in the system as it stands and to use their own tools against them. Right? Schopenhauer actually makes that point in the art of controversy. He says the reason why I'm giving you this information about how these people try, you know, win arguments duplicitously and without adhering to the dialectic, is so that you yourself can use some of these tools if you've got right on your side. And there's that phrase there, if you've got the right on your side, and of course it comes down to the question of whether or not you know. And of course Machiavelli, I interpret it again as a revolutionary text. You wouldn't need to be reading Machiavelli. This is not it's not original with me, this interpretation. It's quite a famous interpretation. But you wouldn't need to read Machiavelli's The Prince if you were already in power. You only need to read Machiavelli if you want to be in power. And this is what I think it comes down to. It's not the tyrant that's at the top that is your biggest threat. It's the tyrant who is at the bottom who wishes he was at the top. Hitler wasn't a threat once he was in power. He was his most dangerous when he was getting to power, when he was giving the talks in Berlin, when he was making these, you know, sophistry. It was just, oh my God, it was just pandering to the lowest common denominator. It was keeping people weak. He was telling a story that the German people wanted to hear. A story about purity, a story about heritage, just after they'd lost a war, just after the Americans had come in and started drawing crayons all over the map and arbitrarily assigning where these borders should go. And he told a story that sounded true for enough people who were angry and pissed off, and then he gave them a scapegoat. He gave them someone to take it out on. And the real criminals were the people who stood around and did nothing. The people that just kind of let it happen, the people that appeased him, the people that drove the trains every day because that was what was convenient. And I know that it sounds like a very...
people blindly following orders.
Right. Oh, so this brings me to the final point here. I'm proposing the Oculus Rift concentration camp as a piece of rhetoric. I'm not proposing it seriously. I shouldn't have to say that. If I'm a proper artist, I would have just left it out there in the open, and if you couldn't work out I was being rhetorical, well then more fool you. But we live in a day and age of social media with reactionary people that can take things out of context. So the reason I'm suggesting this very, you know, hard-hitting sounding thing is because I want to convey the gravitas and the importance of this issue. With stuff that we were talking about today with Peter, it's a shame it was such a bad line, but a lot of this stuff is actually very important that people understand, because the geometry of the landscape has fundamentally shifted. We are no longer in the same world that we were in a few years ago. We're picking up new habits all of the time, and these habits are being handed over to us by this technorati elite, by these serial entrepreneurs who understand the system better than their peers, and are then using that knowledge to their advantage. So I wanted to turn the tables, use some of their tools, and say, well, why not this? If this, then why not this alternative? Why not use the same cunning tricks of psychology and reactance and getting you to react and make bad decisions? Why not use these tools so the tyrants get led down like lemmings into the Oculus Rift chamber? So there are three people in game design. Sebastian Deterdy mentions this. Look him up. Codingconduct.cc. He's big into ethics and game design and UX, user experience design, and all this kind of thing. There are three types of actor, okay, in a system, in a game. And a game is just basically life with extra constraints. That's all it is. Because if there are no constraints within a game, then it's not really a game anymore. It's just life itself, right? And life is very, you know, the goals are unclear, let's say. It's very vague. Whereas a game, the goals are clearly defined. So people tend to like games. You can easily shepherd someone's time. You're essentially time farming when you're building games. You're being parasitical on their time, because they're spending their time with you as opposed to anything else. And if you can grab their attention, get their eyeballs on this screen, on this mobile, you can then start bombarding them with advertising and getting them to react in other ways. And what you're doing is you're taking them away from all the other things they could possibly be doing at that moment. They are creating a Jungian shadow self, all the things they could have been but never were, because you're robbing them of that potential. So there are three types of actor in any system, in any game that has rules in it. You've got munchkins who just play by the rules, and they just kind of do things the way they're supposed to do things with minimal understanding of the environment outside of the system itself. They don't understand the wider context. You have exploiters, and exploiters are like tyrants or a government that lives on the border. They exist on borders, and they're there to watch as people come over that border, and they're in their gun turrets, and they're watching, okay, you've gone over that arbitrary line. But who put this arbitrary line here? Ancestors. And then Sebastian says you've got this third category, the ethical hacker. And the ethical hacker is someone who, like the exploiter, understands the inside and the wider context on the outside and tries to realign the incentives so that the system on the whole is more sustainable. And so it's this idea and this understanding of incentives and systems. What did the rules say before? And what was the intention in those rules? What intent did you want to have? And what is the system doing now? And how do those rules need to change so that we can maintain the spirit of the law? That justice, this idea is that justice isn't just everyone rigidly adhering to the strict nature of the rules, like Nazi Germany. It's about adhering to the spirit of the law, or as Socrates put it, everybody minding their own business and not interfering, particularly like what we have in the global economy, where there's this constant intervention and interfering. And of course, you know, like I've said before, the fact is it's not in dispute that money can be printed. Money isn't scarce. There's more money in the world right now than there's ever been. The quantitative easing is proof that money isn't scarce, that money can be printed. The question shouldn't be whether or not money is scarce and should it be printed and where does it come from. The question should be who should print it, on what basis, and how much should be printed and where should it go first, because whoever gets the money first is going to see ridiculous profits. So given that we have this information, given that we've now got the same tools that the government has in terms of surveillance, you know, every single one of these has now got a camera in it, it's a surveillance device, why not redirect that same set of system and that same set of tools, but direct it in on ourselves and give ourselves ownership of this information and this data? Rant over.
Well, that was a pretty hearty rant.
Yeah, I've been bottling it up, you know.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've had a proper tryst before coffee, so I don't have a whole lot more to add to that.
Well, you always make really good comments, Jamie. You always make some really insightful comments, and you're more into the whole kind of voluntarism than I am, just because I think you've been in it longer than I have.
It's, and like I said, a lot of it, it's stuff that you've been fed this indoctrination your whole life, and it's cognitive dissonance. You don't realize things that are right in front of your face. I mean, you can look at something that's clearly like this. It's clearly a can of soda, but you've been told your entire life that it's a mouse. And you can look at the thing all day, and people will tell you it's a can of soda, and you'll say, no, that's a mouse. I've been told all my life it's a mouse. And then one day, something comes along, and you get that click in your head, and you say, by God, that is a can of soda. And you start to look at things a little bit different. And it's something that everybody has to experience for themselves. It's not, you can't force that cognitive dissonance that people have. It's not something that one particular piece of information or thing you say to somebody or thing that's been said to you flicks that switch to make you see things differently. It's just different for everybody. And for the past couple of years, I've been looking at the ways I've seen some people get that little switch flipped and trying to narrow it down, but it really is so much different for everybody. But we try to point it out as far as we can.
It's about encouraging curiosity, isn't it? It's about helping people think for themselves.
Right, and like I said, helping people, pointing out to say, well, look at this and see if you're consistent with that, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess that isn't consistent. And then if you look at your own thought processes and you trust your own thought processes more if you figure something out for yourself than you do if somebody just tells you it.
Yeah,
at least exactly. I think so.
But I think it's much more sinister. I think the reason why kids are taught how to be taught in school and they're not taught how to be curious is because the system doesn't want them to be curious. And if you don't have those kinds of incentives lined up as early as possible, then you're really just wasting someone's life. You're putting them in a mental prison for the rest of their lives because they're conditioned to only want to satisfy short-term needs. They're not satisfied to think. They're not taught to think long-term. They're not taught to think critically for themselves. I think a lot of people are. I just think that one of the problems, particularly of the human condition as such, is that when you are part of the demos, or the hoi polloi, to use the pejorative, your main concern is conformity, right? Your first priority is don't break with the norm. Now, some conformity is very useful. For example, driving on the left-hand side of the road when you're in Britain is a good idea, right? And other forms of conformity, like, I don't know, using a dominant currency that's that's all the rage. I think using Bitcoin right now within our own ecosystem is probably a good form of conformity. But stupid forms of conformity, like what you wear or what skin pigmentation you have in a particular region of the world, this is really just tyrannical. And I think that what particularly Aristotle wanted to say later on, post Plato, was that it's about being a virtuous person. A virtue ethicist is someone who just knows the unique response to the unique situation. It doesn't just respond to every moment in life in a general way. It doesn't have to go to a rule book and say, well, it wasn't my fault. The rule book said that when this happens, this is how I've got to respond. But actually someone who could respond to the unique situation in the unique way and be phronimous in that sense, that we really are at our best when we are unconscious, when we are not overthinking things. And you know, I don't have to have someone asked me the other day if I'd stopped believing in Bitcoin, presumably because I've been saying something critical on air. And I said, well, I don't have to have a belief in Bitcoin in order for it to work, right? It just works. It doesn't require belief. It's like using a phone. I don't have to believe in the phone to use it. I just use the damn thing. I am my world existingly, to quote Heidegger. And this idea that you can just fall into the world, fall into what Csikszentmihalyi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the psychologist, positive psychologist, calls flow, where you're just in flow. And you just become absorbed into your world, and that's what we turn up for. Why do you think, you know, artists like Taylor Swift draws in so much attention? People turn up to see greatness. They turn up to see someone in flow. They don't turn up to see someone stressing out on stage and they're not sure what they're doing. They haven't rehearsed and they're analyzing everything, and everything they do is based on belief. They're turning up to see somebody who is prepared and who's put enormous amounts of time, their discretionary, unique, irreversible time into learning a craft.
And somebody that's good at their craft, yeah.
Right, right. And in ancient Greece, there was little discernment between an artist and an engineer, really, because art, the word techne, where we get the word technology from, actually means to art and craft. It means work. It means meaning, something like meaningful movement. Because this is the difference that Aristotle's going to draw, is the difference between physis, or nature, that which moves on its own esteem, that which has its own momentum, just raw energy, if you like, and the soul, you know, dynama, and the psyche, this idea that you have this kind of meaningful movement of life itself. Life is a kind of movement, right, that is non-random, that contains meaning for us, and requires a certain decision making. Now, even if you're a determinist, because this comes up later in Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard and people like this. In fact, if you look at my Twitter, my latest pinned tweet is a documentary on the Matrix trilogy and about the philosophy of the Matrix. Now, even if you're a determinist, and even if you say you want to make a claim like Daniel Dennett, the modern philosopher Daniel Dennett makes, which is that actually there is no free will, that everything is fairly causal. I don't know if he's changed his mind on that. I haven't read Daniel Dennett in a while, but last I checked, I'm pretty sure he was a determinist. So he doesn't think there's any such thing as free will. Now, it doesn't matter. Even if you say, okay, if you are like a massive computer and you know the position of every single atom in the universe, and you take a snapshot of the universe and you say to that computer, what's going to happen next? Does the computer, with the position and the momentum and the velocity of every single atom, know what's going to happen just because it has knowledge of this one? It's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean that life is meaningless, because even if all your decisions were made for you before you were born, you're still here to witness those decisions. So we can still make a claim something like, yes, all your decisions have been made for you, but you're here to understand why. That you,
and
even
you're
if
experiencing the journey.
Right.
It's like if you're on a flight. You were on a flight to France a couple weeks ago, and you were tweeting out pictures from the airplane and out your window. It wasn't just getting from point A to point B. There was the journey. And I've said for a long time that that's the meaning of life. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And it's how you experience that journey. And, you know, the destination is something to look forward to and kind of an end goal, but it's not the most important part. It's enjoying the things along the way. And, you know, people used to say stop and smell the roses or whatever. I'm not big on roses, but if you see something along the way that you enjoy, you know, for some people it's having a family and kids. For other people, you know, like myself, I don't have a family and kids, but I enjoy doing this sort of thing with, you know, connecting with people around the world on the computer, and enjoy studying technology type things. And it's just different things for different people, and I just think that's a very important part of life, and it's how you experience it.
That's right. It's the community. What you're talking about is a common unity, community, and it's being together and it's, you know, talking about these experiences that you've had. You know, this is the experience I had. You know, this is the experience you had, because everyone's got their own unique view on the world, their own perspective. We're all just witnesses.
Yeah.
So here is this video that I was talking about. You should definitely go check it out. It will give you superpowers. It's called The Philosophy and the Matrix: Returns to the Source. It's quite an old documentary. It's been around for a while, but I definitely think that it's about time you started watching this film again. It's been a long time, and so it takes you through like some of the, you know, pictures, that some of the sort of scenes in the film and what they actually mean. It's really, really interesting. I highly recommend it. It will make you very, very smart. So look, it looks like we've lost most of the people. Only 2 people standing. We're sorry that we couldn't get a better connection to the conference. We had an hour worth of preparation, during most of which the sound and the video were perfectly good, but isn't that always the way with these things? So yeah, you know, I hope you're all having a great Christmas there at home. We have been colluding, conspiring on back channels here at the World Crypto Network. We've been talking on the podio, and we've been thinking about what we want World Crypto Network to become. We haven't had a town hall meeting in a long time. We're very aware of that. So I have scheduled in something for the new year. I know that Tom's remade the website. You go check it out, worldcryptonetwork.com, and see some of the changes he's made. We are absolutely dedicated to improving this. We know that James Bang over in Hong Kong is having a lot of success. He's grown and grown in popularity. More and more people are listening to him. His influence is growing, and rightly so. You know, he took a lot of risks, put himself into a lot of danger.
He was on Max Kaiser yesterday.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I didn't know it was yesterday, but I knew it was coming. And Jamie as well. You know, you worked so hard to be up at all hours and make sure that he was online. I know Tom was as well. So we are very conscious of the fact that we do need to kind of up our game. We need to invest in microphones and things, and we've kind of got some pretty good ideas that we want to put to everyone. But as I think that we've tried to demonstrate, I think at the World Crypto Network, it's all about helping regular people be active participants in the journalistic process and the presentation process. It's not always dry journalism. Some of our show formats, like the Bitcoin Group, are attitudinal journalism. It's not always just about telling things very dryly, because that's not how you get people's attention, right? You get people's attention with charisma, with passion, by voicing a point of view with conviction, whilst also maintaining the position to be persuaded at any time. Like, here is my position, and this is my position for now, but if you can persuade me, then I'll change. Strong views, weakly held. And we're all about helping people that have something to say, that aren't being rewarded for their hard work, and then giving them a platform. In fact, nay, actually let them build their own platform, and we can just help them find their audience here on this network. And that's the same with Leslie. You know, I met Leslie a couple of weeks ago at one of the meetups, and we really had a great meeting of minds. We came from a lot of the same positions. She'd watched some of the videos before, and I was like, well, why are you just sitting there watching them? You should come on. And then I just sent her the link for this show, you know, in Skype, and she was like, oh, what, you mean on air? I'm like, yeah, you know, you've got to be a part of this. There's no excuse. You don't just get to sit there and watch and sit back and just absorb. You've got to be an active participant. We assume that you are on the front line. We're not just here to pander and to talk down to you. I know we often talk a lot. I'm talking a lot right now, but it's also about giving you a platform to talk for yourself so that you can go off and be self-sufficient. So that's what we're all about. We wanted to have another town hall very soon. My life is a bit up in the air. I've got nowhere to live as of the new year, so hopefully I'm going to sort myself out. But once I have got everything sorted out, I promise you I will be back on air and we can talk about 2015. How are you feeling about that, Jamie? How are you feeling about next year?
Hey, I've made it through 45 years already. I think I can make another one. I don't see anything coming that's going to kill me, so, or I hope not. If it doesn't kill us, it only makes us stronger, right? So
that's right. Gotta love Nietzsche.
2015, bring it on. I might shave. Once it warms up, it was 17 below centigrade this morning here, so it was a bit cold, and I guess I said that wrong. It's Celsius now. They changed that somewhere in the 70s. But I don't know. I've met so many great people through 2014 through the World Crypto Network. it's so amazing for me to be able to talk to people in real time all over the world at the same time. I mean, simultaneously having video conference with people in Germany, Russia, Sweden, Thailand, Hong Kong, and and hopefully we can grow this and get people in other parts of the world as well. The hours are crazy, but hey, I don't
But it's
really
exciting.
have a regular sleep pattern.
That's the point. Yeah, if you need sleep, I'll sleep when I'm dead. So thank you to everyone at home. You've been sending in your questions. Just very quickly, John says, I heard Mr. Chris Ellis is a CIA shill. No, dude, get it right. FBI, not CIA. Jesus, you don't listen to the rumors properly. Hattori, Hanzo, you've asked a very long question. Hattori, thank you very much for your loyalty, my friend. You're asking about whether or not PGP signatures are compromised by the NSA. That is a big topic that I would love to go into another time with plenty of experts on the panel, but it is on my list. I have got that somewhere on my list to do as a future show format. So thank you very much for those. Thank you very much for joining us. You can follow me at Mr. Chris Ellis on Twitter. You can follow Jamie Nelson at Jamie Nelson1 on Twitter. Is that right, Jamie?
That's correct.
Our donation addresses, very important. Send us lots and lots of money now, especially if you're rich. To these addresses should be everyone that was on the show today that gave us their Bitcoin addresses. And you can follow at World CryptoNet on Twitter. Until next time, bye-bye.